So the previous week we covered the mandatory acts of wudu, which are four in the Hanafi school. So washing the face, washing the arms, washing the feet, and wiping the head. These are the four mandatory acts. And all of them will be washed once. Okay. Today, شروط صحة الوضوء, the conditions that are required for the wudu to be correct. Okay. So the conditions that are required for the wudu to be correct. Number one, Al-Arqam, that one should be in possession of his mental faculties. Right? So which means what? That if a person is not in possession of his mental faculties, then obviously wudu is not going to be fard, because he is not in possession of his mental faculties. He doesn't know the obligations of Allah Azza wa Jal. So the first one is aql. Second one is bulugh, that there has to be maturity. There has to be maturity, meaning that the one who is immature has not reached the age of maturity, reached the age of puberty. Then wudu is not obligatory on him, because salat is not obligatory on him. Salat is not obligatory on him. So how is wudu going to be obligatory on a child? So that's the second. So the third, well, Islam is a requirement as well. Which means what? That a non-Muslim, how is he going to do wudu if he doesn't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If a non-Muslim doesn't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then wudu is not obligatory on the non-Muslim. No, these are the things which make the conditions that which obligate the wudu. So these are the conditions that a person has to be in for the wudu to even become wajib. وَقُدْرَةُ اسْتِمَاعِ الْمَاءِ, one must have the ability to use, a sufficient amount of water. وَقُدْرَةُ اسْتِمَاعِ الْمَاءِ الْكَافِي. So there has to be the ability to use sufficient amount of water to wash the limbs at least once. Which means what? That what if a person is in a place where there's scarcity of water, right? There's water, but there's not enough to wash the 4 fard limbs in wudu. So what should a person do in that kind of situation? Right? In that kind of situation, you're just going to do tayammum, right? If you don't have that amount of water. So there's aql, a person has to be in possession of his mental faculties. Bulugh, maturity, Islam. Right? A person has to be Muslim. These are the conditions which make the wudu necessary. A person has to, the conditions must be applicable for the wudu to become wajib on such an individual. Okay? So the fourth condition is that person has to have sufficient water to wash at least the 4 limbs once. Okay? وَوُجُودُ الْحَدَثِ وَعَدَمِ الْحَيْضِ وَالنِّفَاسِ. Okay. So it's saying over here that being in the state of minor impurity, this makes the wudu necessary. Minor impurity. So minor impurity is mentioned over here, and this means that a person is not, it's not obligatory for him to do ghusl for the major impurity. So the wudu only covers minor impurity. So for example, if a person goes to the restroom, and after using the restroom, So yes, this person is in a situation where if he does wudu, he will have uplifted that minor impurity, which would allow him to offer the salat. وَعَدَمُ الْحَيْضِ وَالنِّفَاسِ. For women, there has to be absence of their cycle, as well as after birth, bleeding. So this requires the performance of ablution. Okay, this will require the performance of ablution. So, which means what? That if a woman is experiencing her cycle, if a woman is experiencing afterbirth, then wudu doesn't even apply. How can it? Because salat is not obligatory. Salat is not obligatory on such a woman who is experiencing her cycle, who is experiencing postnatal birth. Right? Okay. And finally, وَضِيقِ الْوَقْتِ. When there is not enough time. When there is not enough time left for the obligatory prayer. The wudu has to be made immediately. So if there's little time left for prayer, even in that circumstance, wudu has to be made. Even, you can't do tayammum. You cannot do tayammum and offer the prayer. Well, you know what? There's 2 minutes left for prayer. Let me do tayammum and quickly get it over and done with. No. You have to do wudu. Even if the prayer becomes qada. Even if the prayer becomes qada. So at that time, there's no substitute. You can't do tayammum and say that, you know what? Let me justify it because there's only 2 minutes left. Do tayammum and offer the salat. Because there is a substitute for salat that is offered on time. And that is, you're going to do qada. And this is not going to apply for those prayers where there is no substitute, such as the janazah prayer. So if a person comes in, janazah prayer, right? Is there a substitute for janazah? Once it's done, it's done. Once the janazah prayer is done, it is done. In that kind of situation, if a person comes in late or is in a rush, then yes, there is dispensation, there is concession to do tayammum in that kind of situation and join the janazah. Moving on. Shurutu sihhat al-wudu. The conditions that make the wudu correct, that make the wudu valid. Okay. So, umum al-basharati bil-ma'i tahur. So, water has to reach every square centimeter of the skin. Every square centimeter of the skin must be washed. If any part is omitted, any part which is obligatory to be washed is omitted, even a small part, then wudu is incorrect. Wudu is not going to be correct. Second sentence. وَإِنْقِطَاءُ مَا يُنَافِي مِنْ حَيْضٍ وَنِفَاسٍ وَحَدَثٍ. That there has to be a complete cessation of those things which negate the wudu, which negate the wudu being correct, such as a woman experiencing her cycle, وَنِفَاسٍ, postnatal, وَحَدَثٍ, and minor impurity. So if a person uses the restroom, throws up, these are the flatulence, these are the things that would break the wudu. Okay? So for the wudu to be correct, one has to, if a person goes to the restroom, or at that time, after using the restroom, the wudu, it becomes wajib. Otherwise, there has to be a complete cessation of all of these things for the wudu to be correct. So complete cessation in bleeding, according to the Hanafi school, bleeding does break the wudu. There has to be cessation of urine. There has to be cessation of defecation, cessation of the woman's cycle, postnatal, all of that. There has to be a complete stop. After, when a person does wudu, then the wudu would be correct. So it can't be during. It cannot be during, to keep it simple. وَزَوَالُ مَا يُمْنَعُ وُصُولُ الْمَاءِ إِلَى الْجَسَدِ كَالشَّمْعِ وَالشَّهْمِ. Also, there has to be removal of those things on the body which would prevent and stop water from reaching the body. Right? So if, for example, if there's wax, shama' means wax, right? A person is handling candles, right? And wax falls on his, or goes into his fingernails, finger bit. That has to be removed first. Same thing with paint. That has to be removed. Paint needs to be removed. For a woman who wears nail polish, that nail polish has to be removed for the wudu to be correct. Right? Glue. Right? Kids work with glue. So that glue needs to be removed for the wudu to be correct. So if anything prevents water from reaching the body, such as wax, grease, fatty grease, even nowadays, those medicated lotions, right? It's thick. You have to put on a very thick layer. So that would possibly prevent water from reaching the skin. That would be a problem. Wudu would not be correct if a person is washing, because the water is going to slide off. It's not going to even touch the skin because there's a barrier now. Right? So all of these things, they have to be removed from the body. Only then will the wudu be correct. Inshallah, we'll stop over here. We'll open the floor for questions.
If somebody has a bandage on the hand or on the finger, like band-aid.
Yeah. So in that kind of situation, band-aid, you can do masa on that. It would fall within the hukum of jabira. So because if a person has a wound or something and he's put a band-aid on it, then one does not have to wash that part. Just simply do masa over it.
Does that mean just wipe on it?
Yeah, just wipe over it, yes. To the best of one's ability, so as the water doesn't touch the affected part. Otherwise, it could become infected.
Even though that portion is big,
Even if it is big. So for example, a person who's wearing a cast, it's not prudent to get the cast wet, otherwise that would pose a problem. So yes, you would do masa on the entire cast.
It's not diamond.
Yes. Still wash, because there are other parts that can be washed. Only if a person doesn't have the capability to handle or use water himself, then in that kind of situation the person can do tayammum. Yes?
Some paints are difficult to get off.
Can you repeat the question?
Some paints are difficult to get off. What
Yes.
do you do in those cases?
They still have to be removed. I mean, there's just no way around it. The paint has to be removed. Use acetone or something. There's a lot of things, paint thinner, that can be used to remove paint from the skin.
Even the size is small.
Even if it is small. Yeah. Even if it is small. It has to be washed.
Yes.
Sheikh, is there a stipulation of the size of impurity, for example, paint in this case, that should be more than a certain size? For example, if a drop or something falls, it's very small. So how small or big should it be?
It doesn't matter how small.
Okay.
Yeah, there is no limitation. It just has to be. Yeah, it has to be removed. There's no concession. It has to be washed, so it has to be washed. Yeah. The hukum of the Quran is pretty clear, right? Because the Quran clearly states that it has to be washed. It doesn't give any concession there. Right? Same thing in the hadith, that there is no concession that, well, if there's a small part that is missed or one is unable to wash, when there's capability of washing it, then we might have to look into other schools. Right? If there is a genuine difficulty, we might need to look at other schools and to see what they say. And if there is dispensation there, then we can, adopt the ruling of that school. But this is the blanket ruling.
Can you clarify on the bulugh?
Bulugh,
Why is that called out specifically? I mean, if young child is going to pray, then they have to make wudu. Right?
Yes.
So
it's not obligatory.
Why is there a need?
Yeah. So it's not obligatory. So what the author is trying to say, that for a young child, it's not obligatory for a young child to do wudu, because salat is not incumbent upon him. Right?
But anybody who's doing salat,
Yes.
wudu is obligatory on that.
Anyone who is mature doing salat, wudu is obligatory, not on the child.
Okay. So
Not on the
child
child.
could pray
Technically,
without,
yeah.
a child could pray without wudu.
A child can, technically, it wouldn't matter, because it's not obligatory on the child. If a 5-year-old child, gets up and starts offering the prayer, just like that, okay, he's offering prayer, but wudu is not incumbent upon him.
How about using Quran?
Same thing with Quran. I mean, yes, we would like to teach the children from a young age, but the objective of jurisprudence is to establish what is permitted, to establish what is not permitted. So if we want to be really technical, then no. It's not obligatory for a child to do wudu to touch the Quran. It's not obligatory for a child to do wudu or even pray the salah to begin with. But having said that, that doesn't mean that, we let it happen. We have to teach the children from a young age, teach the child from a young age that you have to be in the state of wudu to offer prayer. You have to be in the state of wudu to touch the Quran, and so on and so forth. This is bare bones jurisprudence. They want to establish the law. But that doesn't mean that, okay, yeah, you know what, I'm bringing my son to the masjid, oh well, it's okay if he just offers the salat without wudu. So that's not a good precedent to set.
How about tattoos? People put
Can you repeat that? What was that?
tattoos.
Yeah.
Tattoos? Tattoos go below the skin.
So that's
Yeah.
okay.
That's fine. If a person has tattoos, it's below the skin, specifically in the first layer of skin. It's not on top of the skin. So that would not prevent water from touching the skin. It would still touch the skin.
So any kids who's gonna put the pen marks on the skin, that needs to be taken
That should be removed, yeah.
out.
Pen marks on the skin, yeah, that should be removed. I mean, some pen marks they're not that thick where it would prevent water.
Some permanent markers are
Yeah, some permanent markers, yeah, that would be an issue. Permanent markers would be an issue, so that has to go. Usually if it's on skin, it's easy to take off.
Try to remove it as much as possible.
Sheikh, what is the age limit you said for wudu to be eligible?
So it depends on the maturity of the child.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends. So usually with boys, it's 15 or nocturnal emission. And for girls, it would be 12. It all depends on climate. It depends on region. It depends on area, environment, all of these things.
But it is said the girls should be 7 and boys should be 8.
No. Girls, the youngest that can become mature is 9.
9?
9. The youngest that they could become mature is at 9. And for boys, it is 12.
Before that, they don't need to do for praying.
No. It's not obligatory for them to pray.
Till 9?
Till 9. It is not obligatory. And again, this is just bare jurisprudence. They want to establish the law. So yes, technically, it is not obligatory for a child to pray if they are not mature. But that doesn't mean that you don't encourage the child to pray. It doesn't mean that you tell the child, well, you know what, do your salat without wudu.
No, the region I come from, we have this, every ceremony is there for everything in our region.
Yes.
So, like Bismillah or some Khatm Quran,
Yes.
region. So, in our region, they say 7 is the age for the girls. And I always found it very too young for the girls to start with 7 because they're still so like kiddish kind of.
Yes.
And for them to have mandatory praying and mandatory reading Quran with wudu is kind of, always thinking about it.
Yes.
Now if it's 9.
It's 9. It's 9. And then if you go by age, so 9 if you go by their cycle.
Okay.
This is when a woman, when a girl can experience her cycle, according to medical sciences as well. And then by age, you would go by 12.
Okay.
For boys, the earliest that they can become mature is 12. Right? The earliest. They can experience a nocturnal emission at the age of 12. By age, 15.
Does it have to do something with the armpit hair or with the hair of the
If there are signs.
Okay,
yes.
signs.
There has to be signs, yeah. So usually the voice becomes more deeper.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the voice becomes deeper. There's always signs.
Yeah.
And when they get to that age, it's always important to sit down with them and have that conversation. Yeah. There should be no barriers between the father and son and the mother and daughter when it comes to explaining the rules of taharat, cleanliness, explaining the rules of maturity, what is allowed, what is not allowed. It starts from a young age. This was how Rasulullah encouraged the Sahaba. So the Prophet ﷺ clearly said that, encourage your children to offer salat. So what does that mean? Right? You can only encourage them if you teach them other things. Right? If you teach them other things, you teach them about maturity, teach them about wulugh.
So the reason I'm emphasizing so much is because there's a kind of peer pressure that builds on these kids, because we just randomly say, hey, you're not praying because you already past 7 years. But that's not true, right?
No.
They have to be 9 years at least to start.
Yes.
But we can practice, like you said, we can bring them to the masjid, we practice every day, they follow us, and they love, they can follow all the 5 years.
Yes. Any habit that is inculcated at a young age, that's going to last forever. So when we inculcate the habit of salat, wudu, all of the obligations, the devotional practices.
Obligated for wudu, automatically first namaz, fasting,
Yes.
all the 5 years, everything comes.
Everything.
Everything.
So once a child reaches that age where they are mature, then yes, everything that is fard for you and me, for an adult, it will be fard on them as well. Because technically, according to Islam, they are adults.
Okay.
They are adults. According to Islam, they are adults. And that is what is taken into consideration. Nowadays, the society that we live in, we tend to infantilize the child, right? But when you think about it, somebody is 20, 21 years old. We're like, oh yeah, bacha. Right? He's still a kid.
Pediatrics.
Yeah. But at 20, 21 years old, Muhammad Fateh, he conquered Constantinople. At 21 years old, he conquered Constantinople. Muhammad al-Fatih, Muhammad the Conqueror. How old was he? 21 years old.
Still a child to his father. I'm still a child to my mom.
So regarding time, there are 2 situations, right? One is another prayer you can, before it's gonna finish, you join it, right? With time. So the other situation is when water is not there, you can make time.
Yes.
What are the other situations where you do that?
Janazah comes to mind. There could be Salatul Khusuf, the lunar prayer and the solar prayer. That's performed during the lunar and solar eclipse, because that's a prayer that there's no substitute for it.
I see.
Yeah. So tayammum would be okay in that kind of situation. I would have to look at it if there's additional. Imam Shafi, he would give fatwa at the age of 14. Imam Shafi, he would issue religious edicts at the age of 14. His teacher, Sufyan bin Uyayna, memorized.
So basically, he was measured by the time I was 14. He was naturally.
Or he was treated as an adult.
Yeah, naturally he was.
Yes.
Everything was like measured. Yeah. Understood.
As I said, the society that we live in, we tend to, keep the kids young. We want to keep them babies. I mean, that's fine. You can always treat them like that, but at the same time, we need to impart the importance of, their religious obligations. Because only when you impart the importance of the religious obligations, they will grow up to be habitual in those religious obligations. Otherwise, it's not possible. And then what happens is that parents, they have this assumption that, let me keep my child as a child, and we have this expectation that, okay, when we send our child to weekend school, that's when they're going to learn everything. That's not the case. The weekend school it's not a solution. It's not the be all end all. Right? There has to be some kind of training at home, because the vast majority of time, where's the child? The child is at home
And school.
And yes, if you look at Ismail alayhi salam. Right? Ismail alayhi salam, he grew up in the lap of his mother, Hajar alayhi salam, correct? And when Ibrahim alayhi salam came to Ismail alayhi salam and said to him that Inni ara an adbahuka, that I see that I have seen a dream where I am slaughtering you. You know how old Ismail alayhi salam was? 8. How did he say to his father that Ya abatif al ma tu'mar, that oh my father, whatever you've been ordered, you do it. سَتَجِدُنِي إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مِنَ الصَّابِرِينَ. You will find me from amongst the patient. He was 8 years old at that time. He was 8 years. Where did he learn this? Ibrahim alayhi salam was gone. He was in Palestine. He was not in the Haram area. Where did he learn it? From his mother. Now, this is an example. There are many examples like this where a child has to be taught from it. Even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also had this sense of responsibility. He mentioned that in my young age, I would tend to the flock. I would tend to the sheep of the Quraysh for qararit, for a few, qararit, for a few pennies. From a young age, he was working. And from a young age, he was going with his uncle to the Rihlat al-Shita al-Sayf, the caravans of the summer and winter. So training, it starts from a young age. And that doesn't mean that, you take away, the childhood. No, one can still have fun and games and all of that stuff. But a child should be conscious of his or her religious obligations, because they have to continue when a child becomes old. Otherwise, they will not offer the salat. They will not, perform their religious duties. And this is one of the issues of why the masjids are empty, because we're not teaching the kids from a young age. It's important.
Is that